welcome to the program. This is Vivica Williams, and you're watching Head to Head. 4 years into the war in eastern Ukraine, and the human toll is devastating. According to the UN, millions of people, half of whom are elderly, are being forced to make impossible choices between food, medicine, shelter, heating, or their children's education. The situation has exhausted both people's finances and their ability to cope, as well as that of the international community. Today, we want to talk about what to expect in 2018. Joining us in the studio is Ingrid Macdonald, head of the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Ingrid, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
So what has your organization identified as the top needs for 2018?
So in terms of eastern Ukraine, the contact line that divides the two areas is 457 kilometres long. There's 5 crossing points in that area. What this is meaning is that every month there's about 1 million crossings that are happening across that area. It's very difficult for people. Sometimes they have to wait for a long time, and especially at a time like now where we have the winter, we become very concerned about the impacts on them. What it also means is that the people there sometimes find it difficult to access food, and so food security is increasingly of concern. Last year we did a study and we actually saw a doubling of food insecurity from 2016 to 2017. And in what area are you talking about? So I want to divide this a little bit. So you're saying first the people who are having to cross back and forth. So people have different reasons why they remain in occupied territories, and these crossings take a significant amount of time. There's no place for people to be covered from weather. So you're saying this is a major concern of how to address this? Yeah, I mean, there's 5 crossing points, and those the 2 territories, which are called the non-government controlled territories of Luhansk and Donetsk, they have 4 crossing points in terms of Donetsk, and then there's 1 crossing point in terms of Luhansk. The Luhansk situation is of really deep concern because it's only really a footbridge. So all of those thousands of people who are crossing every month, and I'm talking many of them are elderly pensioners, because in order for them to access their pensions, they have to cross into the government-controlled areas. They have to go down a rickety steps, go across this bridge, which we've been struggling to repair for a couple of years, and then go and access that, and then make the journey home. They also need to go through a variety of checks on both sides of the border, and also if you are the head of a household and you've got small children, you'll often have to bring your children with you and bring them back. So the people are going through quite extreme situations to do this, and they're doing it, and they have been doing it for many years, but they're very tired.
Absolutely. I mean, for going on for so long, and part of this you're saying also connects to food insecurity.
Yes. So last year we actually did a study where we looked at food insecurity. This was done by the Food Security Cluster, which is a group that brings together all of the different actors that work on food security. And what they found was that, particularly in the non-government controlled areas, that food insecurity has doubled in the eastern region of Ukraine. The reality, though, is when we talk food insecurity, it can be quite different from other contexts where you think about food aid in a very traditional way. Here, what we've seen is that the contact line that divides the areas, people have been having to go across to get their services in the government-controlled areas for things like livelihoods and other areas. But what has also happened is that when that contact line went through, the traditional capitals were the city of Donetsk and the city of Luhansk. So those peri-urban areas now are having to take on quite a significant burden for all of those people who go across, get what they need, and then go back. It's also the other area that's quite concerning is the fact that our access can be quite difficult.
Absolutely.
And so it can be quite difficult for us to do operations in those areas, and so we're constantly seeking to find ways that we can actually increase that access. And finally, the funding. The funding has been very low for this conflict. There's many competing priorities, many difficult issues that are being faced across the world.
Well, in long-term conflicts, which are low level, people become exhausted.
Exactly.
It's exhausting on all sides. So what are the thoughts of how to combat this and how to try to increase support here in these areas?
Well, one of the things is we have this coordination structure where we have the senior leadership who come together, which is called the Humanitarian Country Team. One of the things we've been doing is trying to work on thinking about how we can ensure that the situation and the needs of the people in Ukraine get the sort of focus that is required at the global level, and also, of course, at the local level as well, because, of course, there's many responsibilities that are held here. So there's been quite a good use of different works. Every year, what we do is together as a humanitarian community, we look across at what all the different needs are. And we produce this, which is the Humanitarian Needs Overview. For this year, I can say that the Humanitarian Needs Overview for Ukraine is excellent. We have excellent data, and all the different sectorial coordinators and all the partners have really pulled together to give us a very good reflection. What it shows is that we have 4.4 million people who are affected by the conflict. 3.4 million people are in need of assistance or protection. Unfortunately, what we also have to do is produce this document, which is the Humanitarian Response Plan, which sets out how we're going to respond to those needs. Because the funding is so limited, because the access is constrained, we're unfortunately only going to be able to respond to 2.4 million people.
So of this 4.4 million, and you said the 3.4 million that need aids, who are these people? What does this include? This includes the IDPs, yes. And who else is included in this?
It includes conflict-affected people as well as internally displaced people. So anyone who's affected by the conflict.
So people who are living near the front lines, lives that are disrupted.
Yeah. Or in the non-government controlled areas. I mean, the majority of where people are is in the non-government controlled areas, the contact line, and further back from that if you're the internally displaced people.
And how are you able to monitor the situation in the occupied territories? I know that must be terribly difficult, if not almost impossible.
I mean, one of the things that is very important is, as humanitarian organisations, we do this all over the world. So we're constantly working in territory where we have to engage with different actors. And so we're experts at knowing how to do negotiations. We're expert in terms of knowing how to do engagement. What's really fundamental is whenever we do our operations, we do it according to a set and agreed principles, which is the principle that we respond to the need, we respond to those who are most vulnerable, and we don't take sides in the conflict. And so in the non-government controlled areas, what we try and do is we try and adhere strictly to those principles and ensure that we can monitor our programs, we can assess the needs, and we can ensure that those who are most vulnerable can get the needs that they want. But it is extremely difficult.
Absolutely. And so for the coming year, what are some of the priorities you're seeing within? What has been set out as some of the responses that they'll be able to carry out?
One of the top priorities in this conflict is the issue of protection. Because there is such a large internally displaced population, because you still have active hostilities that are happening, along that contact line, there's 200,000 people who live in the government-controlled area 5 kilometres from the border. They are affected. There's 47 shellings that happen regularly every day on estimate. And so those people are regularly being affected. Children have to go to schools with sandbags, they have to hide in bunkers, and there's one of the really big concerns that we have is actually the landmines and the unexploded audiences. So I think that this is something that we're very concerned about and one of the key priorities. The other one is to ensure that we can get the assistance in and to the assistance to the people who need it most. And also a really important one that we're working on this year, which is key also to, which being looked at in terms of these different protracted situations around the world, is how we better link the humanitarian and the development response. How do we ensure that we've got, that we're putting people at the centre of what we do and that we're organising ourselves with the different resources that we have to ensure that we can reach them and we can meet their needs in the best way possible.
Okay. Well, this sounds like it's daunting, but we're having some hope for this coming year.
Absolutely, and just to say that the people in this country are extremely resilient, and we've found that even with all these challenges, we still find that people are resilient. They want peace, and they want to have an education for their children. They want to move on with their lives. They want to have jobs. They actually want to move on, and we're here to try and do the best that we can to support them in that.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Ingrid.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Today we spoke with Ingrid Macdonald, head of the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Thank you for watching.